We love our freedoms in America. Should we be pursuing policy that ensure public safety or protect civil liberties, or should we strive to do both?
Both.
I suggest this because for all the talk that I'm hearing about the need to prioritize affordable, reliable energy, I agree. We also need to be advancing clean energy for the sake of the grid, for the sake of environmental protection, for the sake of public health. We don't have to choose between the two. They're not mutually exclusive. We should be striving to do both. That's my position. Do you agree or disagree?
In Washington, hearings often feel like political theater. Long speeches, rehearsed answers, and very little that sticks with the public. But every now and then, a lawmaker cuts through the noise and forces a moment of truth. That's what happened when Senator Alex Padilla questioned Energy Secretary Wright. In just a few minutes, Padilla exposed the contradictions between the secretary's words and his budget. He reminded the country that America doesn't have to choose between jobs and clean energy, between security and liberty, or between affordability and sustainability. We can and we must do both. This exchange was more than back and forth in a committee room. It was a fight over America's future, a future of clean energy leadership, or a future of retreat and missed opportunity. Let's break it all down.
I know 5 minutes go quick, so I'm going to jump right into it. First couple of questions may seem off topic, but there's a point. Please humor me here. You're a science guy. Cybersecurity is a top concern for the country. Should we be embracing policies to ensure people's privacy or security, or should we be trying to do both?
Both.
Thank you. We love our freedoms in America. Should we be pursuing policy that ensure public safety or protect civil liberties, or should we strive to do both?
Both.
I suggest this because for all the talk that I'm hearing about the need to prioritize affordable, reliable energy, I agree. We also need to be advancing clean energy for the sake of the grid, for the sake of environmental protection, for the sake of public health. We don't have to choose between the two. They're not mutually exclusive. We should be striving to do both. That's my position. Do you agree or disagree?
I would agree.
Thank you very much. Now, a couple of things also to correct the record or to comment on some of the statements you made at the outset, where you made suggestions that some of the funds released at the tail end of the Biden administration were rushed out at the last minute without appropriate due diligence and review. My experience, our office's experience, that it came out at the tail end of the Biden administration because of the due diligence and review that took place. We had been anxious and pushing the administration for years to move on some of these projects. So I just wanted to note that different point of view. Second, your comment about oil and gas resources in America. You seem to have left out the potential and positive contributions of solar and wind and geothermal. You painted a picture of intermittency being a challenge. I point to the experience and quantifiable progress made in California when you integrate battery storage into grid reliability and affordability. So that being said, let me jump back to the key topic of today's hearing, and I'll go back to several of the statements you made during your confirmation hearing. Your statements, Mr. Secretary. You said there was 3 priorities you had. The first was to unleash American energy at home and abroad to restore energy dominance. However, the budget request proposes a 74% reduction in the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy. It zeroes out wind and solar energy technology offices. And it also zeroes out the Office of Clean Energy Demonstrations, which was authorized by the bipartisan infrastructure law. Solar was the fastest growing energy source in the world last year. So how does completely eliminating the Solar Energy Technologies Office advance America's leadership?
So solar wasn't close to the fastest growing energy source in the world last year. That's installed capacity, not energy produced, that data. And 1 year is a tricky data thing. Solar is growing fast. I've worked in solar. I'm in favor of solar. And so we've way over invested resources in hoping wind and solar will will magically transform into something they're not. But solar will continue to grow for sure. All I've advocated is we should subsidize it
cutting
less.
you off, but our data suggests otherwise, and we'll certainly follow up with questions for the record and beyond. The second priority you identified in your confirmation hearing was we must lead the world in innovation and technology breakthroughs. I counter that with your budget request, which includes a 14% cut to the Office of Science, a 57% cut to ARPA-E. Again, there seems to be a disconnect between what you say are priorities and your budget requests. It's already been raised that these reductions would also lead to staff reductions in national labs, which we've recognized, you're on the record, these are premier research institutions. When you came to California, you reaffirmed your commitment to the national labs, and you said that they were important to maintain and secure, quote, competitive advantage and security. So unless I got that wrong, how do you expect the United States to lead the world when your budget proposal seeks to decimate our research and development capabilities?
It does hurt me to cut spending in science.
Then don't do it.
Share that passion with you.
Then don't do it.
Passion with you.
Then don't even propose it. Lastly, and I know my time is nearly up, your third stated priority was to, quote, build things in America again and remove barriers to progress. However, in May, the Department of Energy announced cancellation of 24 projects totaling $3.7 billion in investments under the industrial demonstrations programs. Now, these funds were intended to support unprecedented innovation in cement, glass, chemicals, and iron industries, I think core for the future growth of infrastructure in America. And it's not just because $1 billion of the public and private dollars are in California and the thousands of jobs related, but how does canceling industrial grants that lead to more industrial jobs further the goal of building things in America again?
Because an evaluation showed that the projects at the end were not viable. There's no point in building a bridge to nowhere. If you make a factory make a product 25% more expensive, but customers won't pay 25%,
well, the projects that are being cut are more than just viable. I would argue they are critical, and we'll be following up with you and, again, hope for the responses as Senator Heinrich has emphasized. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
In Washington, congressional hearings are often dismissed as boring or technical, full of jargon that never connects with the public. But sometimes a hearing captures something much larger. It exposes the tension between rhetoric and reality, between promises and policy. That is exactly what happened when Senator Alex Padilla challenged Energy Secretary Wright in a recent exchange that is now spreading widely online. At first glance, this was a standard oversight session, a senator asking questions, a cabinet secretary giving rehearsed answers. But what unfolded was something different. Senator Padilla managed to expose how the secretary's budget contradicted his own stated priorities. He highlighted a fundamental question: will the United States lead in the clean energy revolution, or will it sabotage itself to protect the fossil fuel status quo? And the way Padilla did it was methodical. He didn't start by arguing about solar panels or wind turbines. He started by building a simple but powerful framework, the idea that in America, we don't have to choose between two important goals. We can do both. Padilla asked the secretary, should we prioritize privacy or security in cybersecurity? The secretary replied, both. Padilla asked, should we protect civil liberties or public safety? Again, the secretary said both. And then Padilla sprung the trap. If we can do both in those areas, why can't we also prioritize affordable energy and clean energy at the same time? Why frame them as if they are mutually exclusive? This was a clever move. It set the stage for the rest of the exchange by showing that the secretary's approach was based on false choices. Padilla reminded him and the public that leadership isn't about either or, it's about doing both. From there, Padilla moved into correcting the record. The secretary had suggested that funds released late in the Biden administration were rushed out recklessly. Padilla countered, pointing out that those funds took years of pressure and diligence to be approved, and that if they were released late in the administration, it was precisely because of the oversight process. In other words, the claim of rushed spending wasn't just misleading, it was false. Then Padilla addressed the secretary's view on renewable energy. The secretary painted solar and wind as unreliable, intermittent sources that couldn't carry America's energy needs. But Padilla, speaking from California's own progress, reminded him that integrating battery storage changes the game. Intermittency is a challenge, but it's not an excuse to write off renewables. With modern storage solutions, California has already shown it is possible to stabilize the grid while expanding clean power. That example matters because California is often the testing ground for policies the rest of the nation will eventually adopt. The confrontation deepened when Padilla addressed solar's global growth. He pointed out that solar energy was the fastest-growing energy source worldwide. The secretary tried to dismiss this by saying that installed capacity is different from actual energy produced, and that focusing on a single year was misleading. But this response missed the bigger point. Growth rates matter. Installed capacity today is the foundation of energy production tomorrow. By trying to minimize solar success, the secretary only highlighted his reluctance to embrace the future. Padilla's main argument, however, came when he walked through the secretary's budget proposals. Here, the contradictions became undeniable. The secretary had claimed that his priorities were to unleash American energy, to lead the world in innovation, and to build things in America again. But the budget told a different story. Padilla laid it out clearly: a 74% cut to the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, complete elimination of the Solar Technology Office, elimination of the Office of Clean Energy Demonstrations, which was created through bipartisan legislation, a 57% cut to ARPE, the Advanced Research Projects Agency for Energy, the very office designed to drive breakthrough innovation. On screen, these numbers hit hard. They weren't minor adjustments, they were devastating reductions. They weren't consistent with leading the world in innovation. They represented a retreat. Padilla tied these cuts directly to American competitiveness. If China, Europe, and other nations are racing ahead in solar, wind, and battery technology, how can the United States claim leadership while gutting its own clean energy research? Leadership requires investment. By cutting funds, the secretary's budget undermined the very priorities he claimed to champion.
This wasn't just about energy. It was about jobs. It was about whether the United States chooses to create the industries of the future here at home or watches them be built overseas. For decades, American workers have seen industries outsourced, plants shuttered, and communities hollowed out. Clean energy represents a chance to reverse that trend, to build jobs in solar, wind, batteries, and advanced manufacturing. Cutting those programs isn't fiscal responsibility, it's sabotaging opportunities for American workers. Padilla sharpened the point by bringing up national laboratories. These labs are some of the most advanced scientific institutions in the world. They have driven discoveries in nuclear energy, advanced materials, and cutting-edge science for decades. When Secretary Wright visited California, he praised these labs, calling them essential for national competitiveness and security. Yet his budget would slash staff and undermine their ability to function. Padilla called out the contradiction directly. If you value the labs, why are you cutting them? At this point in the exchange, the tension rose. The secretary admitted the cuts hurt him, but Padilla pounced on that opening with a blunt retort: then don't do it. Those 4 words were the climax of the entire exchange. They cut through the excuses and rationalizations. If you know the cuts undermine your own priorities, why propose them? If you know they hurt America's innovation edge, why advance them at all? This was the mic drop moment. A reminder that leadership isn't about making excuses. It's about aligning words with actions. Padilla wasn't done yet. He turned to industrial projects that the Department of Energy had canceled, 24 projects worth $3.75 billion, focused on industries like cement, steel, and glass. These weren't abstract programs. They were about modernizing some of the dirtiest industries to cut emissions while creating thousands of jobs. They were designed to demonstrate that America could rebuild its industrial base in a clean, sustainable way. The secretary dismissed them as not viable, comparing them to building a bridge to nowhere. But Padilla flipped that argument. He insisted these projects were more than viable. They were critical. Critical for jobs, critical for competitiveness, critical for reducing emissions in industries that are among the hardest to decarbonize. Canceling them wasn't pragmatism, it was surrender. Throughout the entire exchange, Padilla's strategy was clear: Expose the gap between rhetoric and reality. The secretary could talk about leadership, innovation, and building in America, but the budget told another story, one of retreat, cuts, and missed opportunities. And that's the real lesson here. Policy isn't just about slogans, it's about choices. Do we invest in the future, or do we cling to the past? Do we prioritize American workers and innovation, or do we protect old industries at their expense? Padilla reminded the country that we don't have to choose. We can prioritize affordability and clean energy. We can protect jobs and protect the planet. We can lead in innovation without leaving communities behind. The only thing stopping us is political will. The exchange also highlighted a broader political dynamic. Progressives like Padilla are pushing for investment, ambition, and leadership. But parts of the government remain tied to fossil fuel interests, hesitant to embrace change. These hearings expose those divisions for the public to see. For viewers, this wasn't just about one senator versus one secretary. It was about a vision of America's future. A future where clean energy is not just a climate solution, but an engine of economic growth. A future where national labs drive discovery, not face cuts. A future where industrial workers are building steel, cement, and glass in facilities that are modern, clean, and globally competitive. And most importantly, it was about accountability. Because when officials claim to support innovation but propose budgets that gut it, someone has to call them out. That's what Padilla did. This exchange should be remembered not just for the mic drop line, though "then don't do it" deserves to be replayed again and again, but for the clarity it brought. It showed that the path forward isn't about false choices. It's about embracing both affordability and clean energy, both jobs and environmental protection, both innovation and fiscal responsibility. If America is to remain a leader in the 21st century, it has to reject the false choice narrative. It has to invest, build, and lead. And when leaders propose cuts that undermine that vision, they need to be held accountable, just as Padilla did.
So at the end of the day, this hearing wasn't just political theater. It was a wake-up call, a reminder that words mean little without action, a reminder that budgets are moral documents, reflections of what we truly value. Senator Padilla reminded the country that leadership requires courage, not excuses, that the future isn't about protecting outdated systems, but building new ones, and that when confronted with decisions that would harm innovation, jobs, and America's competitive edge, the right answer is simple: then don't do it. If you believe America should lead the world in clean energy, innovation, and jobs, then moments like this matter. Share this story. Talk about it. Hold leaders accountable when their words don't match their budgets. Because the fight for America's future isn't won in slogans, it's won in choices. And we, the people, have a voice in what those choices will be.